February 1945. Iwo Jima, a tiny island of only 21 square kilometers, yet destined to become the bloodiest battlefield of the Pacific. U.S. Marines crawled forward yard by yard under withering fire, facing concrete bunkers and labyrinthine tunnels. Artillery shells, machine guns, even heavy bombs could not silence the Japanese strongholds. Then came the low roar of Sherman engines. But these were no ordinary Shermans. Instead of a machine gun, a nozzle at the bow erupted in brilliant flame. In an instant, the cave mouth vanished in a torrent of fire. Jets of liquid flame shooting over 75 yards, filling the tunnels with heat and choking smoke. Screams echoed from within. The Japanese had never faced anything like it. They could resist tanks, artillery, even bombers, but the inferno unleashed by the Zippos, as Marines nicknamed their flame-throwing Shermans, not only destroyed fortifications, it shattered morale. Defenders either burned in place or fled their bunkers, only to be cut down by supporting fire. One Marine officer later recalled, "We called them the most valuable weapons on the island. Without them, we could never have cracked the caves." From that moment, the Zippo changed the game. And only months later on Okinawa, dozens more Sherman flamethrowers would turn this tactic into Japan's final nightmare. The Sherman was the backbone of America's armored force, over 49,000 built during the war. But in the Pacific, a special variant truly stunned the Japanese, the flamethrower Sherman. It began with the M3A1 Satan, 24 medium tanks converted in Hawaii for the battles of Saipan and Tinian in 1944. They could project a jet of fire 70-80 meters, enough to incinerate bunkers and caves. Their success paved the way for a more refined design. Enter the M4A3R3, nicknamed the Zippo by Marines. Replacing the bow machine gun was a flamethrower nozzle connected to a large internal fuel tank. Its range extended over 90 meters, sometimes close to 150 under ideal conditions. One burst filled caves with searing fire and choking smoke, turning strongholds into furnaces. By Okinawa in 1945, nearly 54 Sherman flamethrowers of the POA-CWS-H1 type joined the fight. A marriage of the M4A3 chassis with a flamethrower system developed by the Chemical Warfare Service and Navy Seabees, they proved so effective that after-action reports called them the decisive weapons for clearing Japanese cave networks. Where artillery, machine guns, and grenades failed, the Sherman flamethrower could annihilate with a single pull of the trigger. That was its true USP, the factor that made it the Japanese defenders' ultimate nightmare. On the Pacific front, Japan knew it could not match America's industry or air power. Instead, it chose a different weapon: terrain. Islands like Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa were volcanic, riddled with caves and tunnels. The Japanese turned them into underground fortresses, command posts, ammunition dumps, hospitals, all buried beneath the rock and linked by labyrinthine passages. Concrete bunkers and spider holes dotted the surface, revealing only narrow firing slits. When U.S. infantry advanced, they were met with murderous fire from near-invisible positions. Weeks of bombardment by artillery and bombers often changed little. Once the Marines moved in, Japanese guns spoke again from the darkness. An Iwo Jima report noted, "Nowhere was safe. A single cave could swallow an entire company." The greatest problem was not just firepower, but willpower. Japanese troops swore to fight to the death. They stayed deep in bunkers, waiting for attackers to close, then erupted with grenades, rifles, and bayonets. Against such defenses, conventional weapons, shells, grenades, even heavy bombs, proved inadequate. Strong concrete absorbed punishment, and tunnels dispersed shock waves. The Americans needed something different, a weapon that could break fortifications and break morale alike. They found it in the Sherman Flamethrower, against which no cave or bunker could endure. Over 49,000 Shermans were built, but only a fraction became flamethrowers. In the Pacific, three main variants emerged. First came the M3A1 Satan, 24 conversions from M3 medium tanks in Hawaii, used at Saipan and Tinian in 1944. Their flame projector replaced the 37mm gun with a range of about 70-80 meters. Effective, but the chassis was outdated, secondary armament weak. Next was the M4A3 Zippo, favored by Marines at Iwo Jima. It retained the 75mm gun while adding a flamethrower in place of the bow machine gun. Fuel tanks were mounted internally, allowing multiple bursts of up to 3 seconds. Its range exceeded 90 meters, and under ideal conditions approached 140, far beyond the washer 40 meters of handheld infantry flamethrowers. By Okinawa, nearly 54 POA-CWS-H1 Shermans were deployed, combining the M4A3 chassis with an improved system developed by the Chemical Warfare Service and Seabees. This was the most refined model, offering both a main cannon and a long-range Inferno. Compared with Britain's Churchill Crocodile in Europe, which hauled a vulnerable fuel trailer, the Sherman Zippo was far more compact and maneuverable, especially on volcanic islands. It was this blend of firepower and psychological shock that made the Sherman Flamethrower the nightmare of Japanese defenders. Few weapons of World War II could make enemies fear both dying instantly and living long enough to face the flames. On February 19, 1945, U.S. Marines stormed ashore at Iwo Jima. In the first days, they advanced only a few hundred yards, suffering thousands of casualties. Every ridge, cave, and crevice was a strong point. Battle reports stated, "Every yard of ground was paid for in blood." Then the Sherman M4A3R3 Zippos rolled forward. When infantry stalled before a cave, they shouted, "Flame! Flame!" The call for fire. A Sherman lumbered ahead under a hail of bullets, then unleashed a jet of flame nearly 100 meters long. The cave mouth erupted in orange-red light, black oily smoke belching outward. Screams echoed, then silence. One Marine officer wrote in his journal, "We had never seen a weapon silence the enemy so quickly. Caves that swallowed whole companies could be cleared with a single burst of fire." The Japanese, long accustomed to fighting to the death, now faced something they could not withstand. Artillery could be endured, bombs evaded, but fire filled every crevice, consuming oxygen itself. Many chose suicide over burning alive. A Marine recalled, "We saw them run out, flames still clinging to their bodies, and our men finished them off. It is a sight I will never forget." When Iwo Jima was finally secured, only 216 Japanese surrendered out of more than 21,000 defenders. After-action reports called the Zippos the most valuable weapons on the island because they turned impregnable strongholds into mass graves. In the inferno of Iwo Jima, the Marines learned that the Sherman Flamethrower was the key to survival and the key to victory. In April 1945, as U.S. Marines landed on Okinawa, they knew they faced the most brutal test of the Pacific War. The island was vast, and the Japanese had fortified it with thousands of caves and concrete bunkers. Unlike Iwo Jima, This time the Americans had more than a handful of Zippos. Nearly 54 Sherman flamethrowers of the POA-CWS-H1 type were deployed, distributed among units. Whenever infantry stalled before a bunker or cave entrance, the familiar call rang out. Flame! Flame! And a Sherman moved forward. The jets of fire shot over 90 meters, pouring into tunnels. Thick black smoke smothered the air. Japanese soldiers inside suffocated, burned, or bolted into the open, where machine guns and grenades awaited them. After-action reports stressed, even when not killing outright, flamethrowers always forced the enemy out of cover. That was their greatest tactical value. Strong points once deemed impregnable, like the Shuri line, fell one by one as flame tanks worked with engineers and infantry to clear the defenses. The effect was so terrifying that many Japanese chose suicide with grenades rather than face the flames. One prisoner admitted, "We were not afraid of death, but we feared being burned alive. When the flame tanks came, our courage vanished." By the time Okinawa was secured, more than 100,000 Japanese defenders were dead. American losses were also staggering, but the Sherman flamethrowers had cracked the toughest fortifications. For Japan, the message was clear. Not even the deepest caves or strongest bunkers could guarantee safety. The Sherman's fire did more than destroy defenses. It consumed the last illusion that Japan could resist indefinitely. The Sherman flamethrower was not as glamorous as strategic bombers or aircraft carriers, but in the island war of the Pacific, it carried a strategic weight far beyond its size. First, it proved the power of specialized technology. Conventional weapons failed against bunkers and tunnels, yet the Sherman flamethrower solved the problem with a single burst. It was no coincidence that after-action reports called the Zippo the most valuable weapon on Iwo Jima. Second, it highlighted the role of combined arms. Flame tanks never worked alone. They advanced with infantry calling flame, with engineers blasting cave entrances, and with artillery and aircraft providing cover. This was combined arms warfare in microcosm, a lesson still relevant today. Third, it revealed the potency of psychological shock. Japanese troops were prepared to die, but fire broke their resolve. The fear of burning alive shattered even the most fanatical defenders. In war, sometimes fear, not wounds, defeats the enemy. Finally, the Sherman flamethrower reflected America's industrial and adaptive edge. From 24 Satans in the Marianas, to 8 Zippos at Iwo, to nearly 54 POA-CWS-H1s at Okinawa. Each step showed rapid learning and scaling. The larger lesson, in modern war, it is not only grand weapons that decide outcomes. Sometimes a timely, small innovation, like the Sherman flamethrower, can change the fate of a battle. From the caves of Iwo Jima to the blood-soaked lines of Okinawa, the Sherman flamethrower proved that sometimes the decisive weapon was not an atomic bomb or a carrier fleet, but a tank rebuilt to breathe fire instead of shells. They burned not only fortifications, but also the last hope of Japanese defenders that they could hold out forever. It was the moment where technology, industry, and tactics fused into a weapon that was both mechanical and psychological. Yet the Sherman flamethrower is only one of many untold stories of World War II. Weapons that seem small yet changed the course of history, and men who lived and died in the fire of battle, still waiting to be remembered. If you wish to uncover more of these hidden chapters, where history is told with both numbers and emotion, join us at Oblivion Archive, because the past is never silent. it still burns, reminding humanity of the true cost of war.